Welcome to the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where we help you conquer the internet one video at a time. We cover everything from how to start a YouTube channel to how to make a video go viral. And now, here's your host, the one and only Dusty Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 328 of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Dusty here, the host of the show, where each and every Friday I bring you a 30 to 45-minute interview with a wonderful YouTube creator, and I talk with them about what makes their channel tick, the different strategies they use to grow their channel, how have they monetized their channel, how are they making money on YouTube, and so much more. So if you're looking to either start, grow, or monetize your channel, this is the podcast for you. It's absolutely free of charge to subscribe. So wherever you listen to your podcast, just hit that subscribe button. That way, every Friday, you will get notified each and every time we come out with a new wonderful episode like this one that you're listening to now. A huge thank you to TubeBuddy for sponsoring and allowing this show to be free. If you don't know who or what TubeBuddy is, you can use our link down below to get access to it for free for 30 days. That's right, a full month of using TubeBuddy. This week, I've mentioned this multiple times here on the show, I had to go through and replace a link on like 500 of my videos, and instead of doing it individually, TubeBuddy allowed me to bulk edit my descriptions, and it took me like, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes to go through and find the link, get a new link, and then allow TubeBuddy to do its thing. So if you want to check them out, definitely do so below. And we're also brought to you by wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/Dusty Porter. This week's shout-outs are Andrew Gibbs from Quick Tech Videos and Lesser Known Adventures, Corbin White, Nathan Miller, Don, Koramic, and Anthony Pizzuto. All of you guys are patrons at the $5 tier or higher. If you would like your name and YouTube channel shouted out on an episode a month, you can support us at that $5 tier or higher. You also get access to our creator Discord, where myself, all of these fine folks, and other past guests and future guests hang out and talk about YouTube and everything in between. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out. And something we're adding starting this month in December is a 1-hour Discord or Zoom call with myself and the other folks at that $5 or $5 tier or higher. So definitely check that out. It's just another way for you to support us. Many people wonder, well, why do you need that? Well, listen, it takes time to reach out to guests. It takes time to vet the people who want to come on the show. Then it takes time and research to research the guest and what questions do I want to ask and the different things that I want to present to bring value to you guys. So it's just another way to do that. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show this year. We are getting into the last month of the year, as this is December, I believe, 2nd, as you're listening to this. I have my annual State of YouTube recording coming up in a couple of weeks with the brothers Nick and Dee Nimmin, where we have an hour, sometimes plus, conversation about where the different things that YouTube have done over this previous year and where we see it going in the next year and beyond. So definitely stick around for that. I would listen to those previous years of that State of the YouTube episode because it's a fun chat and it's kind of a great way to kind of see where YouTube has been and where we think that it's going and see kind of where we hit and miss with our predictions as well. That's often fun, a bingo game to play. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's jump into this week's conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's conversation on the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. I'm super excited today. I'm a big fan of our guest today. I've been watching and consuming their content for a couple of years now, I believe. I discovered them, I believe it was during the mainstay of the COVID pandemic. So I've listened to a lot of this person, but I'm joined today by Bill Fairchild from NerdNest over on YouTube. He makes videos and podcasts about video games, and he is also a high school science teacher. Now, that part I did not know. Bill, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dusty. Thanks for having me on.
So, science teacher, as a video game nerd, your students must love you.
Well, honestly, when I go to work, I really don't talk about this other stuff that I do all that much. Like,
sure,
we have a giant state test at the end of the year, and just trying as hard as I can to get all of the information about astronomy, geology, and meteorology and stuff. Cover all of that stuff before June is incredibly hard. Like, it's a breakneck pace. And so whenever my students, like, we'll have conversations about video games in general, like between the bells. But as soon as school class starts,
It's
like
all
it's all
business.
done and it's all science all the time.
Now, my wife is a third grade teacher, and that is one of the grades where they have the state standard test here in Georgia, where we live. And basically everything you just said, she would ditto. It's miserable trying to get all of that done before, trying to get that information in those kids' brains before that time. So I can't relate, but my wife can, and I kind of live that life with her. As you know, when you're a spouse of a teacher, you kind of know a little bit about what goes on. So really interesting that I want to talk about the origin story of the channel. So NerdNest is what it's called now.
Yeah.
It's not always been called that,
No.
and we will talk about that for sure. And I'm sure you will in this next answer. Can you just give me the origin story of the YouTube channel and kind of how it came to be?
So I have been creating podcasts and videos and stuff like that for a really long time, actually. I had a channel before this that was Run, Jump, Stomp. I used to live stream my recording of podcasts over on Twitch. And when Stadia got announced, I was like, oh, you know what? I think that's going to be really interesting. I want to cover that. And so myself and another content creator, we partnered up and made the channel Stadia Cast because we figured it's a Google thing. We should probably do it on YouTube because that's going to like bring people there the most. And so we decided we'll make a new channel, call it Stadia Cast, and we would cover Stadia stuff there. And that went pretty well for a while, and we really did have it was a lot of fun. And then like weird stuff happened. Like the vice president of Google in charge of Stadia like reached out. I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody was trolling me. And they said, hey, we want to come on the channel and talk about Stadia. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. We'll see what actually happens. And then it was them. It was John Justice, who at that point was the VP in charge of Stadia. And that really kind of made the channel take off. But then after a while, I have a problem that I get bored super easily. And I got like sick of just talking about Stadia. So and my co-host at the time, he was in the same boat. He was like, I want to talk about other stuff too. So we changed the name of the channel to NerdNest, which is the studio that I record in. That's what my wife calls it because, a lot of guys have a man cave. I don't do anything manly in here. So we called it the NerdNest instead. It was actually something like one of her friends at work came up with it, and it was just too funny. So we decided to call it that. And then we were like, all right, we're going to talk about all kinds of gaming stuff. And that's how the NerdNest YouTube channel actually came to be.
Yeah, and you had an audio podcast that I listened to for a long while that was called something different. I think maybe it was Stadia Cast that turned into On the Deck, which is kind of the podcast now. Am I wrong?
So a little bit. So originally I had a show called Arcatan's Arcade.
Okay.
And then I said, you know what? Nobody knows how to spell that, so they're never going to find it. So I changed that to Run, Jump, Stomp.
That's what it was. Run, Jump, Stomp is when I started listening.
Right. So that was a long time ago. And then after a while, that show never really took off. I had a co-host on there, and he was in England and I'm in the US, and it was such a chore to try and find a time that we could record that was good for both of us. So we ended up shutting that show down, and then I started a new show called Nintendo Switchcraft because I thought, the Switch looks really cool. I have this bad habit of kind of forcing myself to talk just about one thing, which then I feel trapped, and I'm like, no, I got to talk about more stuff.
Widen it up.
Go ahead.
You widen the gap. Widen it up a little bit. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so I was doing Nintendo Switchcraft, which eventually became Games with Bill because Nintendo just didn't have anything to talk about for a really long time during the pandemic. And I was like, screw this. I want to talk about PlayStation and Xbox and, Stadia and, GeForce. I want to talk about all the stuff. So I'll do that on Games with Bill.
Yes, and Games with Bill I think I was mistaken. I think Games with Bill is where I discovered you. I think that's where I listen. I have a problem as well, Bill. I listen to too many podcasts, and gaming is a hobby of mine. And as a parent, sometimes I live vicariously through others, and so I listen to podcasts where used to when I was younger I could play these games for hours on end. Now I can't do that, so I listen to people talk about video games. I don't know what that says about me. So right now, NerdNest is your YouTube channel. You cover, amongst many things, you cover the video game news. You cover a lot about the Steam Deck, which is a portable handheld device. Folks who are not gamers listening to this, it's just a portable gaming device from Steam. Very similar to the Switch, but you can play all your games from your Steam library, which is a PC gaming kind of provider or platform. So you do this thing, and the YouTube channel has really taken off. You've got a really nice community over on your channel, and I want to talk about that. But before we do that, what are some things early on and even to this day, challenges that you have had to deal with on YouTube, and kind of how have you kind of gotten over that hump?
Well, I don't know that you ever get over the hump. Anytime that, like, one of the main challenges on YouTube is your audience,
right? And
your audience really likes X, and when you talk about X, they show up, and they show up a lot. But as I've said a couple times on the show, or today, like, I like to talk about X, Y, and Z, and also A, B, and C. And it's really frustrating when you feel like, all right, I've done a really good job making this video. This video is awesome, but it's not about X. It's about Z. And you post that video, and you know that it's a really good video, but nobody clicks it. Nobody clicks it, and you think, well, maybe it's the thumbnail, maybe it's the title. I'm not sure why nobody's clicking it, but in the back of your mind, you know the reason. The reason is because your audience only likes to hear you talk about X, and that can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
And people often will blame the algorithm, and I would say don't blame the algorithm. It's because your audience doesn't care about that other stuff. And so even if you care about that other stuff, it doesn't really matter. And I have not found a way past that, because I still get frustrated when, like, I make a video and it doesn't happen to be about the Steam Deck. Nobody clicks it. And I'm like, oh, come on. I worked really hard on that video. I feel like it's a good video, but YouTube will only show it to people who are in my audience first. And if they don't click it, then YouTube won't show it to anybody else. And so it's really hard to get traction without making another channel. And that's a whole other can of worms that's just impossible if you're one guy in an attic.
But it seems to me that you're not stopping creating these videos about other stuff because you love it. You want to talk about it. You have this information that you want to share to the world. So, your Steam Deck videos may get 30, 40, 50, 100,000 views, but then these other videos on other stuff that you want to cover, like you said, it's frustrating. And you mentioned that you haven't figured that out. I haven't figured that out. If someone has, please call in and let me know, because that would, I think that would solve a lot of problems. But I think that it's hard on YouTube because they don't have a very good way of segmenting or separating. I wish there was a way to say, hey, here's the NerdNest channel, and here's everything covering Steam Deck for you and your channel. Here's everything covering the Nintendo Switch. And there was a way to segment it and send that out to people. You know what I mean? If there was a way, I think they're doing a much better job. I've always criticized YouTube of the way that they rolled out shorts, in that it made your channel look hideous. Now they've done a very good job of housing them somewhere else, as opposed to the regular uploaded VODs. What are your thoughts on all that?
So, I mean, there is a way to do that. And there's a couple ways that I've tried it. You can try different playlists.
Playlists, yep.
Like I used to have a playlist that was just Nintendo stuff, a playlist that was just Xbox stuff, and so on. You can also differentiate via thumbnails. So one thing that I ended up trying is having like a border around the thumbnail that if I was talking about Xbox stuff, that it would just be It would just in the bottom corner, it would have like an Xbox controller. And my thought process there was, hey, when people click on a video and they are hoping that it's about Stadia or the Steam Deck or Nintendo or whatever, and it turns out that video happens to be about Xbox, well, then they immediately close it, which hurts your audience retention a ton. So I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll just change the thumbnails so that people know exactly what it's about ahead of time. And you know what that did? That killed my click-through rate.
So, they're like, oh, I can see it now before I even go into it.
Yeah, so now I know that I'm not going to click on that. And the way that YouTube kind of, my understanding, and I don't know anything really, but my understanding is that YouTube shows it to your audience, and based on the click-through rate and audience retention, then they determine, am I going to show it to other people as well? And so it seems like there's no real good way to do it. You can do it with playlists, you can do it with thumbnails, but at the end of the day, YouTube treats your audience as one big glob. And they don't really, in my opinion, I could be wrong, I wish that they found a way, like you said, to segment it so that I could say, all right, you know what? You know who this video is for? This video is for people who like my channel and like Microsoft.
Right.
And so then just show it to them. And if the click-through rate on that is really high for them, then show it to other people who don't know my channel but like Microsoft. And I don't know if that's what YouTube does, but it doesn't feel like that's what YouTube does.
Yeah, the audience retention is a big deal. How long are they staying on video? If you're into website SEO type nerd stuff, a lot of times they talk about bounce rate. How quickly do they bounce off your videos? Do they go to another one of your videos? Do they stay on YouTube? All of these things I believe are a part of what are, for me on YouTube, I am strictly search-based. I do tutorials on all technology software, anything and everything. There's not a set bit of software. I could do way better if I just did YouTube education, like some of my friends, Nick Nimmin and some other folks that I'm friends with. If I did what they do, it would probably be to my benefit, but I like covering tutorials on everything, and it's something that I've kind of honed in on, and I'm really thankful that I did. But for me, all of my results come from search. They come from search from Google or search from YouTube. And so knowing where your audience is coming from and knowing what they want is important. And Bill, do you feel like you've kind of been pigeonholed now that, if you want to succeed, you got to kind of do a certain bit of content?
What? Can you close the door? I think so. Maybe. Every time I try and step out that little chalk outline, the circle that's around my stuff, I want to say, the common phrase is the algorithm punishes me, but it's not that. It's that the audience isn't interested. And so the only real solution, I think, is I would have to make a second channel.
Correct.
And like I've tried making, like I wanted to do a channel about like videography and stuff, or just video editing, like the kind of stuff like making videos. Like I wanted to do like tutorial stuff because that's more long tail and like can continue to be evergreen.
Evergreen, yes.
Yeah, but when you start out with news related stuff, the turnaround time is so fast that none of your videos can really have a long tail because they're all like, all right, this is very important right now, so you got to be fast. But nobody's clicking on it after day 3.
Yeah, it's a struggle for sure, and it's something that again, I don't think we have a perfect answer to currently. Is there anything that, as far as like videography, that's one of the things that stands out to me on your channel and always has, is the quality of your video and your editing. You do a really good job.
Thank you.
Can you just walk my audience through, now that we've complained about YouTube for a bit, can you just walk my audience through a little bit of kind of start to finish of kind of how you record and film and then edit your videos?
So I do it different all the time, and I am constantly trying new stuff. But like most recently, what I do is let's say that I'm setting up, if I'm not sitting at my desk, which I hate recording videos sitting at my desk. I very much prefer to get out from like my big expensive microphone and just do it on like a different way, because I've been doing it with the big expensive microphone for a really long time. So I got my Sony A6400 with a really nice lens on it. I throw a microphone on there. And what I tend to do is I don't really script very well because I'm a terrible writer. So I just do some bullet points, and I'll have those on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll look at the bullet point. I press record, and I'll say, this is the segment about whatever. And then I kind of do a couple of tries at trying to get my point across. And then I stop the recording, and I read the next bullet point, and I start the recording. Mm-hmm. And I do that for the whole thing. Then I import it all into Final Cut Pro, and I go through, and I do all of the A-roll, which for people who may not know what A-roll is basically like just talking head stuff.
Right.
I go through and I edit all the A-roll down to what would essentially be like a podcast. And then I say, all right, now as I'm going through and editing the A-roll, I just kind of write down what I need for B-roll. Oh, right here I'm talking about this, so I got to make sure that I film some gameplay where my character's jumping or something like that. Or I'm talking about the button presses on like a new controller or something. I got to film myself pushing some buttons, because you always want to have B-roll that shows your audience the thing that you're talking about. And so I get the B-roll shot. I import that into Final Cut Pro, and I put all of that stuff on top of the A-roll so that the video is not showing my stupid face for too long. Because just sitting there having a talking head, unless I'm talking to somebody else, horrible audience retention. Like they get bored just having somebody talking for a really long time. So you constantly have to show them something new, something changing on the screen in order to maintain their attention. So what I end up doing is I put B-roll in there, and I cut back to A-roll and then back to B-roll. And that's also how you hide all of your edits. A lot of people will do like J cuts and L cuts and stuff like that. I just throw B-roll on top of it and then don't have to worry about it.
What software do you use for editing?
Final Cut Pro. I used to use, I started out using Sony Vegas because it was really cheap. I think I got it on a Humble Bundle or something. And then I ended up switching to DaVinci Resolve.
Right.
And I tried HitFilm for a while. And then finally I bought a Mac and settled on Final Cut Pro because it's just like I watched some videos and I'm like, wow, that's so freaking powerful.
Yeah, Final Cut Pro, I call it the easy man's video editor. I've used all of them. I've done tutorials on all of them. I'm currently using Premiere Pro. A lot of what I do is screencasting, so I use something like ScreenFlow, and then I export that into my video editor. And then, like you said, if I do have talking head stuff, I'll have that as the baseline, and then I'll kind of edit between those. So hearing you talk about that, you also mentioned the Sony A6400, a great little camera. I have two of those. I film weddings, and I use that for ceremonies and things like that. It's one of the things. It's so interesting to me to hear people talk about their workflow, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Let's talk about thumbnails for a minute. That's one of the things that I jotted down here. Like you, I'm a bullet point guy. I'm never a script guy. I feel like I sound like a robot when I'm reading off a script. So it's not something I do. But let's talk about your thumbnail game, which I believe is top notch. What's your process there?
So I have Affinity Designer 2. I used Photoshop a long time ago, back before it was before Adobe started subscription stuff. And I never wanted to do subscription stuff. Affinity Designer 2 is what I use, and it's like a one-time purchase. And it can, I'm not going to say it can do everything that Photoshop can, because that's a ridiculous thing. But it's super powerful. One of the things that I really like about it is you can have these things called assets. And the way that assets work is you can make a thing in Affinity Designer, and then you can click on that group of things that like a Steam Deck, where I've gotten a picture of a Steam Deck, and then I have gone through and cut out certain parts of it to make it so that when I change the color of the object, It doesn't change like the D-pad or the track pads or the screen or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
It just changes the shell. And so I went through and I made that, and then I selected that as a group, named it Steam Deck, threw a hue saturation thing on there, and then I saved that as an asset. And so now when I go to make a video about, say, the Steam Deck, I just grab that asset, drop it in there, open up the hue saturation slider, change the hue so it makes it look different. And then I throw a nice, very, very bright gradient behind it. I've started putting my dumb face in it for only one of the main reason is because I don't know. I just like to change things up. I feel like if you stay the same all the time, people are going to look at your video and they're going to think, did I already watch that? I think I already watched that. And they're just going to scroll past. So I try and make sure that it's different every time. But again, using those assets makes it so you can do it pretty quick with turnaround. I have an app on my Mac called, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's Pixelmator Pro.
Yes, I love that app. Yes.
Yeah, and the only thing that I use that for, and I'm probably not using it to its fullest potential, is if I want to put my dumb face on a thumbnail, I take a selfie with my iPhone in portrait mode, which automatically has like a mask built in. I drop it into Pixelmator Pro. I say, select me. It selects me, and then I copy and paste that into Affinity Designer 2. And it's so much easier than trying to cut myself out of an image manually.
Yes. Did you say the name of that software is Infinity Designer Pro?
Affinity
with the A. Okay, Affinity. I'll definitely put links to that in the show notes. I've used a lot of them. I don't think I've ever used that one. I primarily, because once you get in the Adobe suite of the subscription, and my wife being a teacher, we get a discount as well. And she creates assets to sell for teachers and things like that. So because of that, we're kind of in the Adobe suite. But I do oftentimes use a site and service called Canva. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
I have heard of them.
Canva. Love them. And they've got some really easy tools and templates, because a lot of folks, you seem to have a knack for creating visuals, whether it be video or imagery for your thumbnails. But a lot of folks on YouTube, they create the content, but they struggle with the thumbnail or the recording of the video. So it's interesting to hear you say that. I do want to come back to something. You mentioned something in your previous answer about the talking head stuff doesn't have very good viewer retention. I find that very interesting, and I would like to know why you think that to be the case, whether it be they get bored or whatever. When I consume your content, I go to one of your videos, like let's just say, for example, your most recent video as a recording of this podcast, 6 upcoming games in 2023 to watch. I will go and click that video and listen to it as a podcast oftentimes.
Oh, yeah.
And I found myself doing that more and more. And again, I know I'm on the other end. I'm a podcast fanatic, but I feel like YouTube going forward, and I want to cover this with you. You do your podcast long form, 30 minutes to an hour, with primarily you solo. Sometimes you have guests. What do you think the future of long form content is on YouTube, and specifically podcasting?
Okay, so 30 minutes to an hour, I've been doing that for years.
Yes, me too.
And doing it by yourself is going to have terrible audience retention. Not because the information is bad, but because I know that like you're like, you just listen to it, which is like, there's a difference between an audio podcast and a video podcast. And I feel like when people are sitting there watching a video, they need something to change on screen.
They do, yes.
And if it doesn't, they start, like, even if the information is good, their mind will start to drift because they are focusing their attention on looking at the screen. If they are just listening, they can they can wash the dishes, they can do the lawn mowing, they can shovel the driveway, and they can listen, and that's going to be awesome content for them. But for when they're sitting there, or they're holding their phone, or they're sitting at a desk looking at a screen, they need something to change on the screen, or their mind will start to wander. And as soon as their mind starts to wander, and I do this all the time, As soon as my mind starts to wander, I close the video and start doing something else.
Yeah, and I think YouTube and TikTok has made us this way.
I do think that. Well,
I mean,
I don't know.
In a way,
it's really
we're
more 1980s cartoons that made us this way.
Yeah, earlier on into this now, but we live in such a society, in a world that if you don't capture them in the first, it used to be 6 to 7 seconds. I was talking to a very popular TikTok creator a few months back, and he said, listen, if I don't get them in the first second or two, they just swipe up. I mean, it's easy. They just swipe. That's all they have to do. And it's just the mentality. And as a creator, it has been it's so hard to get them. But once you get them as an audience member, once you get them as a community member, like you talked about earlier, they will consume that stuff if you're making what they came to you for. And so that's important. I want to talk about monetization for a minute. You're obviously monetized on YouTube. How are you making money from your content currently?
Well, I mean, outside of just YouTube monetization, you mean?
Yeah, so obviously you are monetized with the ad revenue from YouTube. Are you doing anything else to monetize the channel?
So I have sponsors, and so they're not super consistent, and it's more of a newer thing where sponsors will reach out and they say, hey, we want you to talk about this on a video or something. And usually I just reply, hey, here's my brand integration kit with my analytics and pricing. And most of the time they're like, oh, well, we wanted you to do it for free. And I say, well, no, thank you.
Do you mind speaking about your pricing and that brand kit and how you handle that? That's something we don't cover very much here on the podcast.
Well, I don't want to get into specific numbers, but what I will say is that you generally, I would say that I would look at your CPM, which is cost per mil, which that means 1,000. So cost per 1,000. And then you look at your analytics and you say, all right, well, this is my, my most recent videos get this many views. And I think generally people are charging around somewhere between 10 and 20 CPM.
Yes.
And so as long as you're kind of within there, usually what will happen is you'll say, this is my price. And they're going to come back and say, well, we wanted you to do it for free. And I usually say, well, I don't advertise for free, so sorry. And then they'll come back and they'll say, well, how about this? And they always try and lowball you.
Always. It's one of the things to where being in the software content creation space like I am, I get 3 to 4 emails a day. Hey, will you cover my software? Will you do a review of this? Will you compare this to this? And oftentimes they will offer to pay me, but it's a very, very low rate. If one of my videos takes off in search, it could get upwards of, 3, 4, 500,000 views in the next 5 to 7 years because of the long tail of my content. It's very evergreen as long as they don't change the software. And with that being the case, I'm with you. I like to kind of give them my stuff, the information. And again, you learn quickly, and Bill, maybe you can speak on this. You learn quickly which ones are fake or which ones are trying to scam you because you will get a ton of those as well.
Oh my God, there's so many.
Yes.
I got one yesterday. And they're like, hey, and I have no idea. Like, this seems super sketchy to me. They were like, hey, we see that you worked with Brand X. We're also working with Brand X. Would you mind changing your links on your previous video to these links? And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, that is such a, there's so many scammers out there. Be careful, people.
Yeah, please do. And we're getting closer to that 30-minute mark. So I want to ask you, as we're kind of running it down here, what is something you wish you would have known sooner? Like, now that you've done this for a while, looking back, what is something that you're like, man, I wish I would have done that or implemented that sooner?
Thumbnails. Holy cow. Listen, listeners, I don't use this YouTube channel much anymore, but I have a YouTube channel called Run, Jump, Stomp. Go look at those thumbnails. They are terrible. They're terrible thumbnails. And because they're terrible thumbnails, nobody clicked on those videos. Like, I think the average video got 200 views, maybe. And it was because my thumbnails were awful. People, you got to give them something to click on. They got to look at that and say, oh, that's very interesting. Click. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be clickbait. you should deliver on whatever is in your thumbnail.
Right.
But you got to have it eye-catching. Like I tend to use a lot of super bright colors.
Yes.
And that kind of thing. And also, if you're doing search, if like you said, a lot of your views are based on search.
Yeah.
Then your title is super important.
It is.
I feel like for a lot of my content, my title does not friggin' matter. I think people don't ever read the title, because I'll get people who clicked on the thumbnail and then they say, hey, what about this? And I'm like, did you not look at the title? The title said I'm talking about X and you're asking me about Y. Like, read the title. But if you're based on search, then the title is super important.
Yeah, it is. It's very important. And that's why I like to use the TubeBuddy tool that allows me to A/B test it. And I'll A/B test a couple of them and see which one works best over a certain period of time. So that's kind of what I like to do with the titles and thumbnails. One of the things that I like to ask people, and feel free if you do or do not want to answer this. Do you feel like your appearance, as far as physically, like let's say me and you are on a video right now, do you think people will stay or watch a video in regards to how that person looks? Do you think that affects the video at all, or the performance?
You know, boy, that's a hard question.
And I'm not talking about male, female here, because I believe
No, I understand.
I believe there's a big difference there, right? Like if a female goes and displays herself in a way, I think that's obviously going to be clickbait in a way that's different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like me and you are, I don't know how old you are. I'm in my mid to late 30s. And with that being the case, you know, right now I feel like that if I put my face in a video as opposed to like a 22-year-old, I think that it does. I think it affects the performance and the click-through rate of a video.
Possibly. Maybe to your non-audience, like
Sure.
the people who don't already watch your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if people have seen your stuff before and you demonstrate that you know what the hell you're talking about,
Yes.
they're going to come back. And I have watched lots of videos, but like I don't want to say, well, this person's ugly or that person's
No,
pretty
and I
or
didn't want to
something
get
like
into that either. Yeah.
But I've seen videos where there's people who know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, this person does not take very good care of themselves, but
Right.
damn, they know their stuff.
Yes.
And I'm going to watch them every time because they know their stuff. So you don't point a camera at yourself unless you're fairly
Agreed.
I'm not going to say that you're fairly comfortable with how you look, because I am not comfortable with how I look. I've gained weight. I'm not happy with how I look. But I always point a camera at myself. And I think the reason is because I think that videos with a person in them are much more likely to get clicked on and viewed. And honestly, I would say if you show me a video with a person who looks like me and a video with a person who doesn't have a face in the video, I'll watch, like, because I have a ridiculous cartoon face. I will watch the video of the person with the ridiculous cartoon face 1,000 times before I watch a video where I can't see the person talking.
Interesting.
I don't know why that is. I think people just like to see people's faces.
Interesting. Yeah, they like to put a face to the voice. I've always felt that aesthetics, whether they should or shouldn't, they matter. And I think that you see all these popular people, not all of them, obviously. It's not a 100% case, but you see a lot of these popular people, and they're a bunch of pretty people, and that's the way that we're, I guess, wired. I don't know, but I'm kind of with you. I've refrained for years of putting my face in my tutorials, but I've thought about doing it, and it may be something that, just based off of what you just said, maybe I try that. Maybe that even would you say that what you said would be applicable to tutorials? Like if you're trying to learn how to do something, like let's say you're trying to learn how to do something on your computer and you're trying to figure something out, would you be more inclined to watch a tutorial with someone that has a little circle with their face as they're explaining it, or a talking head or a voiceover like what I normally do?
It depends. If you are able to look at the camera and talk about
Sure.
what you're talking about, Because I think a lot of times the people, and I'm not judging, but a lot of times the people who don't put their face in a video, it's because they have to read the script that they wrote. Maybe they don't know the stuff as well as they need to know it. And so they have to depend on the script, and like, do not put your face in a video if you're reading. Unless you got a nice teleprompter. But even then, like, I tried a teleprompter once.
I hate teleprompters.
It was terrible.
Yeah,
I hated it.
Me too. Man, Bill, this has been awesome. I could chat with you forever. Thank you so much for having me on. I am a big video game person, so if you ever need anyone to fill in or have as a guest on your show, I would be honored. And if that's something that happens down the line, I'd love for it to be an opportunity maybe. But would you let my audience know where they can get in touch with you on the internet?
You can find me at nerdnest.tv or youtube.com/nerdnest.
Again, that is the word nerd and the word nest put together, NerdNest. It'll be in the description and show notes of this episode. Bill, thanks again, and we'll chat with you next time.
Take it easy, everybody.
You've been listening to the YouTube Creators Podcast. We want to thank you and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as support us on Patreon for great perks, such as having your YouTube channel featured on the show and a link on our website. Until next time, keep uploading those videos.